Welcome, everyone. We wanted to let everyone in to appreciate that you all arrived on time, and we're going to give just another couple of minutes for others to join. So nice to see people I haven't seen for a while. So I can just start on the introduction before we have Philippe start talking. So just to say, welcome after this huge, crazy COVID process that's still, the epidemic that's still happening. And to say that actually this is the first GBV AoR monthly call. It's become a bit of a misnomer. Monthly call that we've had since the beginning of the year. And that was for multiple reasons. We were all very busy responding to COVID. I think you know that in March and April, we had the webinars by the REGA that you're going to hear more about. And we started having very frequent meetings with our core members. And then I feel like, we had the Global Protection Cluster Forum that went over a couple of months, and there are so many webinars and Zoom calls and everything that I think people got a bit saturated with calls. So we're going to have basically this call be kind of a COVID catch up, and a lot has been happening at the GBV AoR this year, and that we want to give you sort of an update and get people back on the same page. And there will be resources that hopefully you are already engaging with and already know about, but if you don't, this will be your opportunity. And we have Sarah and Laura online who can also let you know how to have access to those resources if you don't know already. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming up in the very near future with the community of practice, with the help desk, and with the 16 days. So I'm just seeing how many, we have about 40 on the call. I think we'll
were coming to us, but it was partly as well because there was more content that was going on. And this is probably something that many of you will see on your selective web pages for your individual organizations that dealt with COVID issues across the way. That peak rose, it was at its highest during April, and then it fell, I suppose, as people became more aware of COVID and it became something that they could manage. But there was a scramble for resources. There are a couple of sites overview, a couple of stats overall. We had close to 16,000 users, 27,000 sessions, and average people used our website for 2.5 minutes. But organizations were really, really looking for help from the GBV AoR, and I think the website helped deliver a lot of that help. Some of the things that people were looking for, they were looking for information management tools. They were looking for psychosocial support services, e-learning, case management, information on COVID-19, and they were also looking at a lot of they were also looking for other tools, regarding mental health. Just to show you exactly where the traffic was coming from, most of the traffic that we have, and this is kind of characteristic of the website overall, comes from top 10 countries. So the US, European countries, and then internally, then you see Kenya and Canada there as well. But overall, 30% of all the traffic came from these particular countries. Only 22.3% came from what we'd say the global south, or what we'd categorize maybe emergency contexts or humanitarian hubs. So you have to strip Kenya out of that, of course. But it kind of shows you that we're still reaching people, but that the internet is still a tool that doesn't always reach everybody all the time. And we have to be considerate with regards to that and how we build a website, how we present assets, so that we have to make sure that it's easily, whatever we produce is downloadable. Quickly, a very quick SWOT analysis of what we kind of came up with. For the GBV AoR website, there was a huge amount of resources that were made kind of very quickly available, whether they be webinars or whether they be tools. Shiva was uploading them like crazy. the team was presenting on a very regular basis. That was a really, that really showed the organization that the importance of the website and the importance of getting it right. Weaknesses, sometimes content wasn't always designed for sharing. We need to always be conscious that people want to share your content, and very often they use particular social media channels. So for instance, in West and East Africa, Facebook is huge. We don't, as an AoR, have a huge Facebook presence at the moment. We've started a page, and it's a project for the coming year. But it's something that if we want to reach people using that kind of platform, we have to make our content adaptable to that sort of platform. Opportunities, there's a lot of opportunities to promote content in countries with emergency contexts. We can keep doing that, and we have to find new ways of actually bridging that gap, the digital divide that we're talking about. And that can be done by creating different types of tools. So in a little bit of time, I'll talk about the 16 days, but it doesn't just mean creating, for instance, webinars. It may also be something like podcasts that can be downloaded in the field quite easily, and they can be digested easily in the field. Finally, the biggest threat, if we're looking at the SWOT analysis, is competition for space of mind and fatigue of the audience. And Jennifer touched on that in the introduction. There's a lot of competition for different resources. So how do we make sure that what we produce, people have the time to consume, and that they can get the main takeaways from each resource? And that's a very quick snapshot of the website that I was asked to produce. I'm available here for questions, I think, after the next two presentations. So thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. And please do, I see some people have already started presenting themselves in the chat, which is great. So please, if you can write your name and organization and the country you're in the chat, that would be very helpful for us. And as Philippe just mentioned, we're going to have the presentation now from Lara from the help desk, and then Sarah Martin from the community of practice, and then we'll open it up for some questions. But if you want to already write your question into the chat, you can also do that. If you're worried that you're going to forget your question, please feel free to do so. So Lara, we're going to move on with you from our help desk.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And yes, hello, everyone. So as we're all aware, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and we saw national lockdowns taking place, schools being closed, unfortunately, there was a big spike in cases of gender-based violence, particularly intimate partner violence, and also cases of early marriage. And one of the consequences of that was lots of different actors were getting in contact with the help desk, really seeking guidance on how to respond in the situation, how to respond to the cases of intimate partner violence, and then also how to respond to, the increasing cases of early marriage. And so with that in mind, we produced a number of different resources that we thought would be helpful to humanitarian actors working at country level and also at field level. So, for example, we produced one of the first papers, which was looking at how to adapt GBV case management services in response to COVID-19 and, the calls for people to stay at home, the social distancing, etc. So we produced one of those first papers, which was, my understanding, very useful to different actors who were trying to adapt their GBV case management services in that situation and obviously move them online. We also produced a paper looking at the challenges that pivot towards remote ways of working and virtual GBV case management, the impact that was having on GBV responders themselves in terms of, the impact on their own mental health and, the challenges that were arising when they were taking things like calls in their home, etc. So that was another paper that we produced. And then we also looked at the particular challenges facing women and girls with disabilities who might be experiencing particular forms of GBV, like intimate partner violence, during the pandemic. And again, how we might adapt case management services to reach those particular audience, because, there was this concern that with the switch to providing support over hotlines, over apps, etc., there was a risk that we would potentially not just exclude people who didn't have access to things like a phone or the internet, but also to women and girls with particular types of disabilities. So we also produced that paper, and then we started receiving requests which were quite specific to particular contexts. So for example, we received a request from a women's rights organization working in Lebanon, which asked us to really look at the impact of the pandemic on migrant domestic workers and their vulnerability to GBV in the particular situation, because suddenly many of them found that they were losing their jobs, and then, you know, because of the the travel restrictions, they weren't able to get home, and all of a sudden there was an increase in also cases of sexual violence. So that was another paper that we produced. And then I think we also worked with the East and Southern Africa GBV regional office to develop an advocacy paper, which was really kind of setting out the importance of making sure that senior women leaders were being included in COVID-19 discussions and response planning, and that there was funding being set aside to cope with the spike in cases of GBV. So in terms of the help desk response, we obviously produced those papers and we tried to disseminate them through our website and through various social media channels. And the contents of many of those papers are now being used to inform the development of an interagency COVID-19 resource pack, which lots of different agencies have contributed their research and you know, practical experience responding to the crisis to development of that resource pack, which I hope we're going to be launching soon, and which is exciting. But one of the other things that came out of the COVID-19 response was also the need for the help desk to also think about how it presents and shares this information, because, you know, when field actors, they're incredibly busy, they don't necessarily have time to go through a 12 or 15-page report. And so something that we try to do then, and we're increasingly trying to do now, is really provide like succinct 1 to 2 page blogs or summaries, which really give field actors the information that they should and must know to improve the quality of GBV care and support that they're providing. And so in addition to providing those succinct summaries, we're also really trying to improve our offer of what we call rapid program support, because we have this roster of 30 senior gender and GBV and emergencies experts. And the idea is we want to encourage people working with UN agencies, with INGOs, with women's rights organizations, who are really on the front line of, you know, responding to cases of GBV and emergencies, including during COVID-19, to get in contact with the help desk. And then we can match you with an expert from the roster who can talk about a needs assessment that you're doing, a program that you're designing, or indeed a program that you're implementing, and really troubleshoot any particular challenges that you're facing to see how we can help solve those challenges. So the focus is less on, you know, producing lots of these knowledge products, which is great, but really providing that practical support and guidance on challenges that actors are facing with the design and implementation of their programs. And that's a learning that we're really hoping to take forward next year in the next phase of the help desk, to try and improve that offer of rapid program support and try and make sure more humanitarian actors utilize it. So that's just a quick overview of the help desk and how we responded to COVID-19. But as Philippe said, once we finished all the presentations, happy to answer any questions people might have.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was very informative. And we will now pass on to Sarah Martin with the Community of Practice. And then we'll open up for some questions.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. I'll try to be brief. Yeah, we also had a huge uptick of members joining us thanks to the COVID response and with the different REGA webinars. We saw, particularly for the first REGA webinar, we had a huge intake and a jump. So we jumped 70% increase in members. We went from 468 members to 662 in 2 months. And that kind of overwhelmed us at first. And we doubled down on our membership criteria, which we have, to try to screen out people who are maybe not necessarily GBV in emergencies people, but yet with the whole world in a pandemic and it being a global emergency, it was kind of hard to do that. But you know, we've been working on that, really tightening up the criteria, making sure that we're meeting that we're reaching out to the people that we want to have in the community who need the support and the help and the guidance, and to keep it field focused and field based, which is our plan. So right now we currently have 832 people in the community of practice. We are predominantly field based. It's 51% of our members come from Africa, the Middle East, or Asia. That's where they're currently based. Another 10% come from Latin America, the Pacific, Europe, and North America, leaving us with about 28% working in the global or headquarters positions. We also are still predominantly UN and INGO membership, but we've been trying to reach out and grow the local women's organizations and to reach out to local groups and local partners, because we feel like they can benefit a lot from the capacity building aspects of that. But we're not really able to edge it up much more than 8% of the population. But we're reaching out, we're doing some stuff with the REGAs, like with the with Noemi in West Africa, and identifying countries also that are not really there, like Afghanistan. There's not a lot of people on the community of practice from Afghanistan, so trying to figure out ways that we can reach them and bring them on board. We are pretty active, and we had a survey about a month or two ago, so we're getting very good positive feedback from the members that they find it useful and helpful. We did move to a new platform last year in the 16 Days of Action, which I think has helped immensely, because you have a lot more options to either go onto the website and browse through, and it has a very good search engine attached to it, or to get a daily digest or a summary every 15 messages or so. We're also able to use kind of hashtags so that you can mute different topics if it's not of interest to you. And we've since also added in people being able to participate in French or Spanish. We ask people to write in the language that they want. We can use Google Translate or DeepL to encourage participation, rather than having a separate Francophone community of practice. We want everyone to be able to talk to each other, and I think the technology has been able to support us on that. We're trying to be very responsive to the needs of the members and help them identify for us the gaps that they see, and to program webinars and activities for them. So we just finished a series of very successful webinars, 2 with Cassie, the Child and Adolescent Survivors, that Emma Pierce with Women's Refugee Commission helped us with. She led them, 2 specifically looking at the needs of adolescents with disabilities and GBV, and then we had a 3 webinar series looking at the new IASC disability guidelines and what it means for gender-based violence, and how we can put more gender-based violence into those guidelines. We've got a good relationship going with the help desk, and we highlight different webinars. We have different webinars for the different knowledge products that they're putting out. So we've had one on feminist approaches to mental health and psychosocial response. We've got an upcoming one on access to justice for women and girls. We also reach out to other groups that aren't in the AoR, like the Prevention Collaborative, the Interagency Working Group on Reproductive Health. We've done some work with the Global Protection Cluster, of course, to have workshops and webinars, just addressing different topics of interest to our members. we've got some upcoming ones that I'll just briefly tell you about we would encourage you to join, and you've probably even received from me requests to be involved in them. But our upcoming ones that are happening is we're going to be working with the AoR comms team on highlighting the minimum standards during the 16 days. So we have an overview minimum standards webinar. We're going to do a webinar on supervision and staff care for staff because we're seeing the strain and the need for support for the people in the field. So we want to focus on staff care. We've got a webinar about capacity building on case management in collaboration with the GBV IMS. And then we have a couple of different ones planned for next year, December and next year, including gender-based violence in the elderly, looking at online gender-based violence, and hopefully a few more activities also just based on self-care and managing stress for GBV actors. So that's it for us.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And now we're going to open up. We don't have a lot of time, but I do want to have a chance for people to be able to direct questions to any of the presenters we just heard from. So to Philippe or Sarah or Laura. So is there anyone online who would like to ask a question? And always remember, you can also write a question in the chat if you are not able to use your sound, or if you just feel more comfortable writing it in the chat. And if you have a question, feel free just to speak up. Okay, so I guess that's a sign to move on. You can, next time we have a break for questions, you can still ask a question from the first round of presenters if you would like. And again, you can, so yeah, there's a question here from Suzy asking, to which email network will you forward the timings for those sessions? I guess this is referring to Community of Practice, to the ones that Sarah Martin just named. Do you want to say how people can learn about your sessions, Sarah?
Yeah, first of all, we really encourage you to join the Community of Practice. It can be a bit busy, and I know people have a lot of email, but I can work with you to set up your digest or to help you just when you want to dip in and go and look at the website. But we advertise everything on that, and with the we work closely with Philippe and Shiva now to start advertising through the GBV AoR. So you can find it on Twitter if you follow us on Twitter, on the calendar on the GBV AoR website page. And then we make sure that everybody receives the recordings in the PowerPoint. They're always stored on the website, and we circulate them through the Community of Practice afterwards.
And it is a very useful resource. So definitely all GBV specialists or GBV actors who are interested in joining the Community of Practice, please do. You can sign up through the GBV AoR website. And Sarah is very friendly about helping you make that happen. If you have any technical glitches, she is very good at helping people. So we're going to move now to have an update from the REGA, and then we're going to hear about a resource package that actually has had collaboration from the help desk with a number of our core members looking at remote work during COVID. And then after that, we'll have the PARG. So moving ahead to Noemi Del Monte, who's one of our regional REGAs, and over to you, Noemi.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. So I'm just sharing like 3 PowerPoints just to visualize our support during COVID. So first of all, the COVID pandemic, like it was like overlapping almost with our scale up. So in each region, we have started to have like information managers and like bigger teams. So that's have helped a little bit to be more proactive. So what have we been able to do was in particular to try to provide guidance to all the GBV coordinators and members on the response adapting to COVID. So we have tried to develop some guidance notes that you can see some like elements in this page, like how to work with community on key messages for COVID and GBV, how to develop contingency planning, how to give staff care, how to set up a new coordination, GBV coordination body that was more for coordinators. So we have developed a lot of guidance, and we have engaged a lot in having French ones. And we have worked, many of you participated in that, and you can still find online all the resources. We have done 7 webinars on GBV, one led by the Anglophone speaking countries and the REGA working in that country, and one in French. So it was mainly Western Central Africa, but we also have Haiti, we also have Burundi and DRC, who are out of my region. And more precisely, we have like development a webinar like discussing the impact of COVID, that now we have a lot more elements on that in relation with the first one we did in beginning of April. We have worked on a webinar on GBV assessment, and also we have used Reach, for instance, for this webinar to see the most advanced tools that we can have for assessing needs, new needs in particular, for the COVID and GBV. And the third webinar was on the continuities of essential service for GBV survivors during COVID, and then an accent on medical care. Then we have a webinar on resource mobilization, a webinar on adapting case management, who has been the most successful one, which is showing how many people are working on this part of the response in our own community. Also because there is interest, because it's an interesting topic, but also because we have a lot of resources on case management. The 6th webinar was on the localization agenda. So it was like sharing a field experience from first responders of women-led organization in particular. And the last one was on mitigating risk. So we have involved a lot of core members of the GBV AoR in leading with us this webinar. We have organized, the REGA organized that, but for example, the one of essential services has a huge participation of WHO. And the majority of the webinar was like on WHO recommendations and like way on how to shape the response with the COVID. And on the localization, we have like organization that we identified in our area of work, specific to the countries. For example, in the French one, we have Sofepadi, who was there explaining how they have invested on social behavior change communication with social media campaign to work on positive masculinity and to reduce domestic violence due to COVID, because they have some increase. So that's what we have engaged the most. It has been very intense. We have been working each week on this webinar for the period of April and May. And this webinar are available on the GBV AoR website and can be used. In my region, I still have colleagues in the countries asking when are we going to do more of that, even if there is some fatigue of this way of working. I think that this kind of activity has been very timely and very needed, and has responded to need of the people, and it has probably influenced also the increase in people logging in the community of practice, looking at the website and so on, because we were reaching out a lot of community, and it has been a little bit unique to have a big reach out on the French community. Also, the last thing we did is we invested on advocacy and analysis of data. The best thing we did, I think, has been done in the East and South African office, who was on the impact and trends during COVID. And we have worked in West Africa with the GBV AoR help desk to understand what has been published on the impact of COVID in Western Central Africa. So it's a secondary data review that we have request, but there were a lot of study. CARE did a study on a rapid gender assessment in Western Central Africa, and there has been other publication by Plan too on the child marriage, which has been useful for us in the region. And the orange one here has been an advocacy activity done for COVID at the very beginning by our REGA in Bangkok, to with the Gender and Humanitarian Action Working Group, to understand the very first impact on GBV and gender. So that's what we have offered, with the continuous support that we can give to country. At the beginning, I can admit that we were much more. I will say it's not proactive, but we were much more engaged on the GHRP countries. Now I think that we are more back in a follow-up with like COVID adaptation on the response, but we are more on a traditional support on the country, prioritizing the country with an HRP. We are still working on for my region is 4 countries more who have not a humanitarian country team and the humanitarian structure. So we are still working with them a little bit on GHRP, but I will say much less country support in relation to the first phase of the COVID-19. Over.
Thank you, Noemi. So I just want to touch on a couple of the points that you made. One is, for those of you who are not aware, the GHRP is the Global Humanitarian Response Plan. And there were 64 countries under the GHRP. So we went from 26 countries that the GBV AoR usually focuses on in internally displaced person settings to 64 countries. And then there were 10 countries that were considered watch countries. So really all of us were quite stretched. So, and actually Lena will talk a little bit more about the GHRP advocacy work in her presentation. The other thing that was touched on by Noemi is that this did coincide with the scale up of our regional experts of the REGA, and we now have teams of 3 in each regional office. Most recently, we've had join information managers for information management officers in each of the regions. We're still missing the one for Latin America and the Caribbean, but we're very excited that we now have very strong teams in most of our regions. And it has been very timely for also getting them on board as we move into the humanitarian response plan phase of the humanitarian work. And so we're very excited about being able to strengthen our resources and support to the field overall. So thank you for that presentation, Noemi. And I am going to now move on to Micah. There were a lot of questions about how to move our services to remote service provision, especially hotlines and case management. And so there were a number of our core members, which I'll let Micah share with you, who decided to create a resource to support the work in the field that was remote based. But over to you, Micah, from IMC.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. So yes, a lot of us worked together to produce some additional guidance for those remote services. Laura mentioned at the start of the call that the help desk put together some early guidance on what remote GBV case management should look like. And there were early papers from GBV IMS and others as well. So that was all really useful in terms of sort of top line guidance. Then around March, several operational organizations, including IMC, IRC, NCA, TroCare, Plan, we started organizing to discuss what more was needed for the field teams who were implementing these services, just to try not to duplicate efforts. So we were drawing on that early guidance related to COVID, but also some existing resources like IRC's remote and mobile services guidance. But we all saw the need to make some tools and guidance that was more tailored to this particular emergency. So just coming together with what our teams were asking for, and then also around the same time, the GBV IMS technical team was putting together a series of podcasts and videos on remote case management. So we linked up with that team as well. So in the end, we had those NGOs I mentioned, as well as the technical team, which includes, of course, UNHCR, UNFPA, UNICEF, IMC, IRC, all working together to decide what was still needed for helping teams. And this was specific guidance for the people in the field delivering services. So this isn't an advocacy paper or general guidance. It was meant to be really user-friendly guidance for programs and service providers who are adapting services in the field for remote work. So we all worked together on these pieces for a while, and some of them have already been released through different organizations. But ultimately, we wanted to put together cohesive guidance that could be rolled out to all partners, and that's finally ready now, being formatted. And ultimately, after all of the different organizations worked together on it, we also got help from the GBV AoR help desk, and Jean Ward, as the main writer within the help desk, helped us pull all the pieces together into what is the final document that will be rolled out. Let me just go over for a few minutes what that now contains. So I mentioned this is guidance for remote services. It's specifically looking at two types of services. That's remote GBV case management services, or phone-based case management services, and also GBV hotline services. So one of the first things that we recognized was that there was some confusion between these services, and some of the messaging and advocacy around what's needed. We saw these two services sort of being conflated, and that there was confusion in the field as well. So one of the first things that this guidance does is really draw a distinction between those services and defines them, where remote case management services relate to an ongoing relationship with a client, usually an existing client, but sometimes new clients through remote case management. And then the GBV hotline service is more of a crisis support line that's available to all. And then ideally that would also be a link to in-person services through a hotline, but that those aren't the same service. The guidance includes, after introducing terms and some clarity there, the main components of the guidance. It has a large section that's around just establishing and delivering those phone-based GBV case management services in the COVID context. And then also another section on establishing and delivering GBV hotline services in the context of COVID. So that talks about the sort of prerequisites and what teams need to do on the ground, what things need to be considered, what staffing you need, et cetera, et cetera. And then there are some additional sections in the guidance that relate to both types of services, with some distinctions outlined within. And those sections are safety planning and other support for high-risk survivors in the COVID context. And then we have a section on updated referral pathways within COVID, a section on documentation and data storage that draws heavily from GBV IMS documents, and then a specific section on meeting the needs of caseworkers and hotline staff in this context. And then finally, there is a list of key resources and additional guidance that we think should be useful. I'm trying to think if I've forgotten anything big that I should go over. So now I mentioned that it is final. We have it in pieces in Word, and right now all that's left is to do some formatting and design work. And we're also hoping that it will be translated into French and Arabic. But maybe I'll pause there. Jennifer, I don't know if the question section comes now, or if you maybe first have anything that I've forgotten to add.
Well, I was just going to say, I know that we have a couple of our other members who've contributed, like Fiona from Trocare, Sarah Mosley from IRC. I noticed also Catherine is online from UNICEF. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to Micah's presentation of the contributors.
I'm very happy.
NCA also, I see. Yeah. Anyone?
Hi, it's Alex from Plan. Thanks, Micah, for the update. I'm so glad to see how advanced it's moved forward. It seems like all of a sudden it accelerated. So thank you for the exciting update on where it's at. I think with like COVID-19 obviously becoming more, well, increasing around the world now with the seasons changing, could be a great timing actually to share around and try to get our teams fully aware of the guidance and have opportunities to organize these webinars or different dissemination events around it, so that our teams are really ready to utilize it when inevitably we'll be in a similar situation again.
Thanks, Alex. And I guess just to plug again, we really couldn't have finalized this without support of the help desk, because we had it, we had really early and good contributions from so many organizations, and we weren't working from nothing because we had those existing resources and then some early COVID guidance. But it was really impressive what people were able to pull together so quickly, and yet then it sort of sat there because nobody had time to really devote to what was required to polish this pretty heavy guide. So we're really grateful that the help desk was willing to assist with that and actually make it a final product.
So I'm aware that Micah actually has to get off the phone at 4:30. Well, if in like 10 minutes, since everyone's in different time zones, I think saying a time doesn't help very much. So actually, I'm going to ask if people have any questions now for Micah or any of the other folks who contributed. If people have questions, any of them can answer, but it'd be good to ask them before Micah leaves, and also questions for Noemi from the REGA, and then we'll move on to the PARG after that. So any questions now related to this resource or to the presentation by Noemi on the REGA or on the IMs? We have a very shy crowd. I said I can never figure out how to do time management, because when I leave lots of time for question and answers, nobody asks anything. And then when I don't leave time, then everybody asks questions and we run over. So please don't feel intimidated or shy. And like I said, you can always write the question into the chat if you, for some reason, feel more comfortable doing that than speaking up. And you don't need to raise your hand or anything. You can just ask a question or make a comment. Thank you for your comment, Alex.
I'll add one comment, as I was so shy earlier, so I wrote my question in the chat box. But I was just going to say thank you so much to all of you for all your work through that whole COVID period. It was massively useful, and you won't always get to see the impact of it. But you know, sometimes there'll be people like me joining who kind of have those regional roles and so on, who then translate it all into kind of cascading it down to country offices. So I just wanted to say well done and thanks a lot. Over. I'm from CARE, by the way. Thank you,
Suzy. I guess Jo Reed is not on the call. She usually our first questioner. That's probably why it's quiet. So thank you, Suzy, for speaking up from CARE. And I think that's very appreciated feedback, because I feel like a lot of us do a lot of work and then we don't always see the results, especially if we're at the global level. So that's very, very helpful and useful feedback. Any other comments or questions before we move on to the PARG? Okay, so Lena, we're moving over to you to hear a bit more about the GHRP and about the PARG.
I do want to make sure you did see one question here.
Oh, I didn't see it.
On the estimated timeline.
On the last, so that one's for you, Micah. If we didn't lose her already.
No, I'm still here, but I don't have an answer about the formatting timeline. I don't know, Jennifer, if you have an
Is that helping through the help desk?
Mm-hmm.
Laura, are you still on? Do you know the response to that?
Yeah, so Catherine has very kindly agreed to facilitate it through UNICEF. So huge thank you to Catherine and UNICEF for that. I've actually just sent an email to Stephanie asking if you know, the different agencies that are involved can provide feedback on any specific requests in terms of how they want the final product to be designed. And then obviously when Catherine has that information, she can hopefully then pass it on to the design team at UNICEF. So things do seem to be moving forward.
And I'm not sure where we're at on translations. So if there are, I know there are some donors on the call. I know you can't always handle last minute requests. So, but if there's agencies, or if there are agencies or donors or both who could support one of the translations, I think Portuguese is still outstanding as a need. And I know that UNICEF has been doing a lot of translation for the help desk. So I'm not sure if that's a possibility, and we need to go back to UNHCR to see if their offer is still standing, because it's taken a lot longer than originally intended. So we can follow up with that afterwards, but if anyone is able to provide translation in one language for this resource, please do reach out and let us know. And of course you can see the resource before you take that decision, but I'm sure it will be very good because the quality of the operational actors doing this is quite high. So I have no doubt that it will be a very useful resource. Okay, so I think that's it. Let's go over to you then, Lena.
Sounds good. And
just to say, actually, Lena is the new facilitator, coordinator, fearless leader of our policy advocacy response group. And we want to give a shout out to Joe Reed from CARE, who really, I think, got things going during COVID with a lot of support from Lena and a lot of the actors who are actually on this call that have had a very active PARG group that was super helpful during the GHRP. So just want to also say a shout out to Joe Reed, who's not here, but others are here, and to Lena, who is bravely taken this over. So it's up to you now, Lena.
No pressure. So hi everyone, as Jen said, I'm Lena Minshew with the IRC, and as of September, we've been a co-chair of the Policy and Advocacy Reference Group, or the PARG. Mentioning the PARG, if I say any acronyms that need clarity, please don't hesitate to put a question in the chat. I'll try not to use them without an explanation. And before I start, I will say a very quick note that we are still on the lookout for another core member to join us as that co-chair, so that we're with somebody. So if you have any questions about what co-chairing the PARG might mean to your organization, very happy to answer those. Just to quickly level set for everyone, I just want to kind of express that the main goal that I have as the co-chair of the PARG is to really help create policy environments or improve policy environments so that your work as GBV experts is better funded, better supported, and the programs that you all know are needed are encouraged through that policy environment. So that's kind of the overall goal, and we look to do that in a couple of different ways. Looking back specifically at the COVID-19 context, since we're doing that catch up now, As Jennifer referenced, the PARG, with colleagues in the call to action, spent quite a bit of time over the summer looking at the Global Humanitarian Response Plan, or the GHRP, in an attempt to ensure it was more inclusive of GBV risk mitigation, prevention, and response. And that particularly in the sections of the GHRP that set objectives for the humanitarian systems response to COVID-19, that those sections were inclusive of GBV in a meaningful way. A big part of that effort was a sign-on letter to our colleagues at OCHA to include GBV as a specific objective of the GHRP. The letter garnered over 580 organizational sign-ons, including multiple international organizations and governments. But I'm really happy to say that the majority of the sign-ons were actually local civil society organizations, really showing the importance of these global documents to those local colleagues. Unfortunately, we were not successful in getting a specific objective in the GHRP, though I will say that there was really a tremendous increase in terms of how GBV was discussed in the document's narrative and in the prioritization that was encouraged from the global document towards humanitarian leadership at country level. And because we did see some increase, but didn't get all the way there, we haven't really stopped pushing at both the global level and elsewhere for the increased attention to GBV in terms of response planning itself. For instance, we've shared with PARG members the need to input into the global humanitarian needs overview, and we've tried to elevate the call to action's newest advocacy effort on how to include GBV in the HNO and HRP, humanitarian needs overview and humanitarian response plan processes. And we absolutely continue to push GBV messages within regional and country level work. That's both within and beyond COVID-19 concerns. So for instance, Noemi, who just presented a little while ago, worked extremely closely with the PARG to create an advocacy note for the Central Sahel ministerial meeting that was held last month. And hopefully that advocacy note will be helpful, not just during that meeting, but going forward to continue to express just how critical the attention to GBV will be in that region. Pivoting us a little bit to moving to looking at forward-looking work. From an overall strategic perspective, we really want to ensure that we're working in step with the core members on future advocacy, and particularly to ensure that the PARG will be in line with the forthcoming strategy of the AoR. And we're also looking to work in a more coordinated manner with our colleagues from the Global Protection Cluster, both obviously to influence those spaces, but also to ensure that we're really not the only ones speaking up on GBV concerns. And I will talk a little bit about some forthcoming work or immediately upcoming work. We will be working on providing a similar advocacy note as the one we did for the Central Sahel ahead of this month's Afghanistan conference, which is going to be held by colleagues in Geneva on the 23rd and 24th of November, again, through very close collaboration with colleagues in country. And we are also evaluating how to advocate for increased legal services to GBV survivors, which is work that's been led by our colleague Patrice Quinlan at NCA. And a first step in that will be reviewing the Murad Code, as well as the work on access to justice that our colleagues at the help desk have already done. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions or address any concerns, whether that's through the chat or through email. I'll put my email address in the chat box. And I guess before I hand back over or answer questions, please don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like any of the documents that I referenced throughout or any further clarity. Thanks.
Thank you, Lena. So you get your own question session since we went early for Micah and Noemi. So are there any questions with the PARG? And I think also, you know, if you want to join the advocacy group, you're also welcome. And I did hear her mention we're still looking for a co-chair of that group from the core membership. So lots of opportunities to participate. And we really do want this to be able to support our field people too, like the Sahel event, like the upcoming Afghanistan event, because we know that people in the field are often overwhelmed and have a lot of other things that they're working on at the same time. So we're really looking for ways to support them, as well as raising issues from the field to the global level. And really, I do think with the GHRP, we all saw, and it was very visible that the amount of attention paid to women and girls as the GHRP advanced each month was increasingly inclusive, and highlighted. And OCHA, you know, often contacted us for additional examples to add. So it did also help that we have a good internal advocate at OCHA as well. So we come at advocacy from all angles. So yeah. So anybody have a question or a comment for Lena, or anyone who's been participating in the PARG want to add anything? Okay, so, you know, I've been on calls where you have like 400 people and we're only 60. Now we're 57. So really, you don't need to feel intimidated. You're among friends. So please do feel that you can raise a and I think also just so many people on this call have contributed to all these different efforts. So feel free to add your comments and insights and at any point. So
sorry,
yeah.
Jen, I did put my email address in the chat. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll just kind of reiterate, happy to have more PARG members and also a co-chair. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to say that the Global Protection Cluster is also very active. So I think we feel like it's a good move that we're getting our groups connected, and they are having a high-level event on the 30th of November, which is sort of finalizing the whole Global Protection Cluster annual, what was the annual event, which became sort of a forum, which again, many people on this call were part of, contributed to. A shout out to Stephanie from our team who really showed leadership on that. And all of these different webinars that we keep mentioning, they've all been recorded and they're all available. So if you have a problem navigating the system to find them, let us know and we can help you out with that as well. So I felt like we might be a little bit global heavy. So I wanted to make sure we included some of the field experiences of the impact by COVID-19 on women and girls, and some good practices that were done at the field level. So I've invited the whole of Syria to present, and that will be Fulvia from whole of Syria, who's going to give us, they just recently came out with a report about the impact of COVID-19 on women and girls. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Fulvia.
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Fulvia. I'm the whole of Syria GBV coordinator and the regional GBV specialist with UNFPA. I sit in the regional Syria response hub in Amman. So as the whole of Syria coordinator, I overlook the GBV coordination that is happening in Syria through Damascus in government-controlled areas, but also through cross-border from Turkey and from Iraq in northeast Syria. What I'll try to share my screen to present this. 1 second. I have a. Can you see this my screen?
Yep.
Great.
Yes, we can see it.
So I wanted to present a bit of the best practices and lessons learned that we have collected, not only within the whole of Syria GBV coordination, but also a bit more within the regional Syria response. And I mean, for sure, this is not an exhaustive list, and I have some of the colleagues on the call from the different country offices. So I would be happy for them to also add on anything that I mentioned, or anything else as well. So some of the things that we have been working on have been, for sure, in terms of guidance and coordination structures. So at whole of Syria level, we issued a guidance note on GBV and COVID-19, and this has been somehow contextualized in some of the specific coordination group. For example, Turkey cross-border had their own guidance note that collected also some of the best practices from their context. In Turkey cross-border also, they went on in creating a dedicated GBV subcluster task force dedicated to GBV in COVID-19, and this has helped them really coordinating trainings, developing this or adapting this guidance note that I just mentioned, but also collecting information coming from the different GBV actors as the COVID-19 situation evolved, and providing concrete and up to speed and up to date suggestions on how to address the issues, and also how to modify and adapt service delivery. In terms of service delivery, I mentioned that first of all, there was a focus on training the GBV actors on remote case management, PSS, etc. And this was done in different country offices and hubs, including the Syria hub, the Turkey cross-border, Jordan, etc. There was a focus on regularly updating referrals and sharing them more regularly, because of course of the very quickly evolving situation. In particular, one of the best practices that came from Jordan was the adaptation of the Amali app, which is a GBV self-referral application, where basically the content was of the app was updated with the section containing all the hotlines available during quarantine, but also there are some new features. So the option to get emergency help with one press to cover critical situations, or option to reach and receive support from a counselor by texting, which are also being added to the app, and that has been really a great example of quick adaptation to a changing environment. Many country offices also and coordination mechanisms have established hotlines and also have worked to coordinate better distribution of dignity kits, reviewing the content based on the needs, developing SOPs, coordinating with certain GBV actors in order to have the dignity kits readily available and being able to distribute where needed more quickly. And also I didn't include here, but I think it's an important, there was an attention to increase cash and voucher assistance, especially due to the economic challenges that women and girls were facing. In terms of policy and advocacy, we developed a donor advocacy brief on the criticality of the GBV services during COVID-19, which I also shared through the community of practice. And this was really to highlight the need for donors to continue to fund GBV programs overall. And this came from the need identified by GBV actors where certain donors had also requested to reprogram and maybe asking to shift some funds that were dedicated to certain GBV activities that they considered less of a priorities, like awareness raising, etc., to prioritize other activities within their programs. So the advocacy brief really also focuses on how all of the GBV actors come together, GBV activities come together, and how they are all equally important, and how certain activities like awareness raising and dignity kits distribution, especially in times of COVID, are really very good entry points for disclosure and therefore to support with specialized services. In terms of assessments, in Syria, at whole of Syria level, we were able to go ahead with basically the assessment that we conduct on an annual basis in the framework of the humanitarian needs overview, that ends up into this annual report, which is Voices from Syria, that you might have heard of, which is like a extensive and comprehensive picture of the GBV situation in Syria. And so even during COVID-19, we were able to do data collection, conducting more than 100 focus group discussion through adapting, of course, to the situation. So in certain places, it was done with a reduced number of people, with infection prevention and control measures. In other geographic locations, they were done remotely, so using either WhatsApp or with different people sitting in different rooms of the Women and Girls Safe Space, and with the facilitator in another room, and all of them jointly connecting through online, through the laptop. So with many different modalities of conducting and facilitating the focus group discussion. We also had an interagency GBV situational analysis in Lebanon that was surveying more than 500 women, and one of the main findings was that 54% of respondents observed an increase in harassment, violence, abuse of women and girls in household or community. And also there was a adolescent girl specific assessment in Jordan that was a rapid assessment that looked to measure the impact of COVID-19 on GBV and sexual and reproductive health and rights among adolescent girls and young women, including women and girls with disabilities. So, I mean, I have added also links to all the available resources. So I'm happy, Jennifer, if you are able to also include this slide into the presentation that you will share. And I'm ready for any question or any doubts.
Thank you, Fulvia. And I find it always refreshing to hear what's happening in the field, since many of us are at the global level working on resources and standards and things, and it's always inspiring to hear about the work that's ongoing. So thank you for that very comprehensive presentation. And I'm aware that Jennifer Miguel is also on the call. So I don't know if you want to add anything, Jennifer? or she was.
Hi, no, I'm here. I think Fulvia covered it all. I think that's fine.
Okay. So any questions from anyone? Or I know you mentioned that you have folks on the line from the field offices. So if anybody from any of the field offices wants to add anything, also feel free. Any comments or questions?
Hello. Yes, hello, this is Fayrouz. I'm the Gender and Protection Advisor for CARE Syria Country Office. I just wanted to thank Volvia and the others for this important briefing about the COVID-19 and GBV coordination, specifically at the whole of Syria level. And because I'm aware how much it's difficult these days to collect any kind of information from the field, specifically when we're talking about very specialized information regarding GBV. So thank you. And I really wanted to appreciate all the hard work they are working on. I have only one question to ask related to the voices and the HNO data collection. And since you mentioned that there is a lot of adaptation around the modality of data collection for the GBV, starting with having online platform and at the same time focus group discussion, remote focus group discussion, I just wanted to ask about the geographical area that the HNO and voices for this year covered. Did they shrink any geographical area? Did it cover the whole of Syria, or there was some exception due to the sensitivity in the in their locations? And at the same time, I just wanted to know if there is any other challenges they faced through the data collection, if there is any tips, because we also at the country office and regionally having a huge challenge in collecting sensitive data collection. Thank you so much. Over to you.
So Fulvia, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute while sharing the
Okay.
screen. Thank you for the question. So yeah, as you probably know, we do not have, we are still discussing on approval from the government of Syria on conducting overall protection assessment in the framework of the HNO. So we conducted focus group discussion, community focus group discussion in Northwest and Northeast, and we do use other program data from different actors and from UNFPA program and implementing partner for the government controlled area. So Voices will cover the whole of Syria and will put together different information points that we collect. We also conducted expert focus group discussion at whole of Syria level, which included actors from Damascus as well. So yeah, the scope of Voices will still be whole of Syria.
I hope those were fireworks and not bullets. But I just heard in the background.
Sorry, I don't know. Did it come from me? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I think the only person with their mic undone. So, okay. Anyway, so I think also if there's more questions from CARE, they can approach you with a bilateral conversation as well, right, Fulvia?
For sure, yes. I'm always happy to discuss this more. I'll put my email also in the chat.
Great. And also just to let people know for our new information management officers have at the regional level started in August and September, but they have been working very hard now on the supporting the HRPs. And just to say that also with the Global Protection Cluster, there's been a lot of work done with the GPC and the AoRs together, supporting for the HNO, going country by country, and now for the HRP, focusing in on some of the countries that are having more difficulty or that are seeing as the most underfunded. priority countries have been selected for additional support for that process. In fact, Colombia was having a session during this call. So just to say, I feel like in terms of support on the whole HNO HRP process and looking for ways to improve the data that all of us can provide and the narrative has been ongoing and is an area that the GBV AoR wants to continue to improve and strengthen. And I think looking at how we can take some of the learning from voices and look at how to scale that up is definitely something the GBV AoR is interested in.
Jennifer,
yep.
Can I add just one thing to
Please.
that?
Yeah.
No, I just thought it could be interesting also to note that, you know, with working with the GPC, and also I think through our work with OCHA under Oslo and etc. But also it's the GBV AoR, but it's not just us doing advocacy, of course. In this HPC season, it will be possible for GBV coordinators in the system to report on the financial requirements and the projects, both in projects-based setting as well as in activity-based settings. So normally for the first time for the 2021 season, so the plans that we are working on now, we should be able to have the reports directly also through OCHA on the official website. So it's a step forward in terms of the transparency around our needs.
Thank you, Astrid, for adding that. And I'm realizing there's so many different topics of things we haven't even touched on, like KASI, like the UNGA event, like ACOSAC. There's a lot that's been going on, and we tried to cover a lot in this call. And I feel like everyone has felt rushed, so apologies for that. But it's hard to fit a year's worth of work into a call. So we'll have to catch up on some of the other topics later. I did want to just remind everyone who's been working on call to action that everyone is at the point of making, developing and making commitments, some of which can be joint commitments. And just to let people know that what once seemed like a lot of time to work on that is being reduced. So I think it's the end of November or beginning of December, or in December, the call to action commitments, but just to remind people that that are planning to make commitments. And if you want to make commitments and you don't know how to, then let us know and we'll put you in touch with the right people. So we want to end the call talking about the 16 days campaign that's coming up very fast. And Philippe is going to talk about what the AoR has been doing at the regional and global level in preparation for the 16 days. We can see your screen, yes, but we can't hear you.
Can't hear me. Hold on a second.
Now we can.
Oh, you
now
can.
I can hear you.
Great. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. I suppose the start of September, we identified a need really to start working towards the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. It's obviously something that's quite important in the year, and it's an opportunity where the humanitarian calendar is, I suppose, sensitized towards GBV issues. And we identified an opportunity really to use this as a time to start building more awareness around the interagency minimum standards for gender-based violence and emergencies programming. As you probably know, they were released last year in November, but because of COVID, they were delayed to a certain degree, and the full rollout really hasn't happened. However, in the meantime, we not only have an English version, but it's come out in French, and in the last few weeks in Spanish as well. So it's an asset for a lot of us. In addition, there's a facilitation guide that's coming out soon. And this will really help local organizations implement some of the minimum standards within their context. So we really felt that using these 16 days would be an opportunity to highlight these standards. And we've put I suppose, a lot of effort in trying to create a cross AoR campaign that brings in all the different core members and many of our associate members who have also helped a lot. And we've produced a number of assets that are based around, first of all, not only increasing knowledge that the minimum standards exist, but also increasing knowledge of what, of what actually they entail and how they can implement them. So the very first thing, that we looked at is what's the best format for doing this? And again, kind of hooking back to what I was saying earlier, we're really fighting this, I suppose, this attention deficit that exists, that people are being bombarded, especially during COVID, with so much information online that we really need to use different formats to get through to them and try to, I suppose, inform them in different non-traditional ways that we would have not done in the past. So the general rule is that, shorter content, shorter videos reach wider numbers of people. If you know the YouTube generation that exists now, everybody is saying short format works well. Longer format is important as well because it gives a greater depth. But if you're trying to reach a wide number of people, look for short format. So we've created a suite of different assets. We're still creating them now. The menu basically is the following. We've got a 90-second video that's currently being animated. So we took a process that usually takes 4.5 months and we've condensed it into about four weeks. And we're producing with all our core members who've kind of been invited to take part in scripting and also the storyboarding of the video. Something that's going to be really, really appealing to our core audience. Next, we're developing what we suppose is a microsite or a page, a specially devoted page, which has on our website, which is a lot more socially media interactive that we can use with Twitter, Facebook, Instagram if we wish. We're also producing a suite of 45-second endorsement videos. So this is where we're going to organizations like your own, and we're asking them to produce short videos about one minimum standard to explain why this minimum standard is important in their organization and how they intend to implement that standard or how they wish that others would implement that standard. So we've put out a number of requests out that way. And in the coming days, we'll be putting out requests with scripts in different languages as well, so that if you are interested in taking part, we can give you a script in Arabic, or we can give you a script and guidance in French, Spanish, a couple of different languages. We have a series of webinars. Sarah from the Community of Practice talked about one of them, which is all about a general, I suppose, introduction to the minimum standards. What we found is that a lot of organizations that we wish knew about the minimum standards don't quite know about them yet. So this will be an introduction, a soft introduction to what they're about, and some of our colleagues will be doing presentations. We're also doing a number of regional events. So our REGAs have been busy in West and East Africa producing events on different minimum standards that they think are specifically interesting for their regions. We're developing an event as well for our colleagues in CASI. We have a social media card. So that's basically different messaging that's going to come out every single day on the minimum standards that will be able to be used again on Facebook and Twitter. And then there's one area which we're very, very excited about, and that's all around the area of mental health and psychosocial support. And again, this is being produced with the Community of Practice. So thanks, to Sarah for helping organize this. It's kind of an idea that's been percolating amongst a lot of different colleagues working in this area, that COVID has been an incredibly trying time for not only all our colleagues, but especially those in the field that may not always have all the resources they need. So we've looked to provide, through a series of webinars and short videos, first of all, guides on staff care, what organizations have as a duty of care to their staff in the field, and how they should be properly supporting them. And that links into one of the minimum standards itself. but also tools for self-help as well. So a lot of different members, including many of you who are in the audience today, have also been contributing things like mindfulness, breathing, things like that. And then we've also, you know, on top of that, we've got a few other smaller assets. So the 90-second video, just very, very quickly, I won't play it now. I can send a link of where we are at the moment with it, and I'll post it in the chat. But just to let you know that it's English, French, Spanish, Arabic, and Swahili. So we're making a big effort to branch out into non-traditional languages that we haven't done before. There is an opportunity as well to use that creative later on in the year as well, and maybe even look for additional languages when the resources match that as well. One thing we're very excited about is that in West Africa and in East Africa, we're producing a series of podcasts which will cover each one of the minimum standards. So again, this is happening in West Africa with Noemi, the REGA, who we all know. And we've already recorded 3 podcasts that will be available over the 16 days. A further 6 or 7 will be released in the weeks and months after the 16 days as well. So part of what we hope to do is create assets that are available throughout the year to give people, you know, deeper knowledge of what's really in there. What's really exciting as well is that the IRC have taken it upon themselves to also create podcasts in English with their East African team. So again, they're following the same format as we are in West Africa in English. And I know that there's interest from other organizations like UNICEF to also produce podcasts of different shapes and forms to spread throughout their networks as well. So it's, if you're interested in taking part or being part of a podcast in a different language group, please get in touch and let us know. And then very much kind of quick conclusion, you know, one of the great things about the 16 days is we'll be creating all this content, which we'll be able to feed back into the system and use on our social media. We're developing lots and lots of new assets, and that means we'll be able to start, as we talked about earlier, not only having a presence on Twitter like we have already, but start using other social media channels which are important in different regions. And we will keep promoting that throughout 2021, some of the things that have been produced. So if anyone would like to get in touch, oh, sorry, the last request, I nearly forgot completely. These are the endorsement videos. So we talked about this just very briefly. What we're asking is for each organization, and we'd like you to consider this for your organization, is to create a short 45-second video. It can be done on an Android phone or an iPhone, basically talking about your organization and the minimum standards and choosing one minimum standard. We're hoping that you will use them in your social media over the 16 days. If you want more information on this initiative, please send me an email and I'll send you the information ASAP. So a little bit of information on what's being produced. There'll be more coming out over the coming days to instruct your communications departments, if you so wish, to spread on your channels. And throughout the 16 days, there'll be a lot of new initiatives that are quite exciting. So thanks to everyone who's been involved so far, and we're getting a lot of help from the whole network.
Great, thank you, Philippe. And I realize we're now a couple minutes over our hour and a half. I did want to so if you have to jump off, understood. Just quickly also to say that the GBV AoR has been working on our next strategy, which is a 5-year strategy and will be launched at the end of January. And a shout out to the Swiss who are funding this whole process with our consultant, Hannah J. from Australia, who is the one who wrote the first strategy. I think she's done like 130 key informant interviews and a number of surveys, and is really trying to keep a balance between consultations with the field level as well as the global level, with members and frontline responders and donors. So really very comprehensive. And it will be in line with the GPC strategy, the Global Protection Cluster strategy, as well as the Call to Action new roadmap. So we're excited about that. And then just to say, we'd be very interested to have your feedback about these monthly calls. If you think we should indeed continue to have, or again have monthly calls, what format you would like to see, if you have suggestions on content. And I would like to also just say, in the past, this was a venue where different organizations could present on new guidance that they're creating, on new tools that they're developing, as well as from the field, people presenting innovative work that they're doing in the field or something they want to share on good practices. And we try to mix both global and field level, as well as practitioners and people who are working more at the policy level. But please do send us your inputs or feedback that will help us guide for next year. And we are, as you saw, doing analysis of our different information products to try to decide what direction to go. And as we said earlier, we know a lot of people are saturated with webinars and calls, so we're not sure if this is still the most useful venue, but it'd be really nice to have your feedback on that. And yes, we hope to see you engaging on the 16 days. And Lena was nice enough to put in the chat that the call to action commitments are due at the end of December. So you have a little bit more of time, but better to do them sooner than later. So thank you. I don't know if there's any last minute comment from anyone or announcement you want to make. I know people are jumping off. So thank you all for joining. And we did record this, so we'll probably make a recording available if you want to listen to it again or share it with a colleague from your organization who wasn't able to attend. Any final comments? Great, thank you everyone. And we really appreciate you taking an hour and a half of your very busy schedule to take part of the call. Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks, bye. Bye-bye.
Jennifer.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.